ahead and get started, at least with introductions. Thank you, folks, for your patience there. So really appreciate the time and attention today. This is a big conversation, a major focus of certainly national attention, one of the biggest stories in the country right now. And certainly student journalists need to have access and should have access to these conversations and more. I'm Jonathan Gaston-Falk. I'm a staff attorney with the Student Press Law Center. For those of you who might not be familiar with us already, hopefully you are, but we provide free legal training, help information for student journalists and their advisors, both high school and college throughout the country. We're the only legal nonprofit in the country specifically focused just on student journalism. And one of our most important resources is this free legal hotline. I staff it alongside of my colleague, Mike Heastand. No question is too small. We really want to hear from you, especially in times like these where we can't keep our ear to the pavement if it weren't for you. So we really appreciate when you approach our hotline. So recently on the hotline, we've heard so many calls, so many questions about how to cover these particular topics, and we're student journalists are looking for ways to cover them in a way that doesn't put them in jeopardy, doesn't put our colleagues in jeopardy. So we're really pleased today to be joined by some very special guests, terrific student journalists at North Texas and Ohio State, to share how they've been reporting on these important communities. But really wanted to introduce our colleague here, Ismael Belkoura, who will be leading today's conversation. Just to introduce him a little bit, so he's a graduate student at Northwestern University's Medill School of Journalism. We're very excited and proud to have him here with us at SPLC just for a semester, but I hope he's not going to be a stranger following this venture. So he's previously a reporter in Texas and a former editor-in-chief of the North Texas Daily at the University of North Texas. So he'll be giving us a little bit of information about the state of some of his research that he's engaged in. And Sunshine Week just wrapped up, so he'll show us how public records a little bit can be one of the ways that we can change how to view some of these questions. So we'll spend the bulk of our time hearing from the students and opening it up to questions. I'm here for the legal piece of things, but hopefully we're not going to delve too far into that and more some strategies, because the law is a big old question mark right now. But with all that, I'd like to turn it over to Ismael. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Jonathan, for that wonderful introduction. Like you said, my name is Ismael Belkoura. Thank you guys for being here today. I will just share my screen so we can start the presentation. So as we've stated, to start this off, is what we're trying to talk about today is how student newsrooms can better cover some of the DEI changes that are occurring at their higher education institutions. Alongside me are Nora Igelnik and Reilly Ackermann from The Lantern. They are both the campus editors for Ohio State University student newspaper. And also we have McKinnon Rice, the current DEI beat reporter for the North Texas Daily, but previously served for the newspaper as editor-in-chief in the fall of 2024, the student newspaper for the University of North Texas. One of the big things that we wanted to talk about, the reason why we want to talk about this issue is that it's changing drastically. As we've seen with the current Trump administration's become one of their sole focuses, but on top of that, it's, at least from my perspective, it's kind of sprouted uh, a little bit out of the blue. About 4-ish years ago, it started to become a topic of conversation about how DEI was being used in higher education, whether it be in hiring policies for professors, the use of diversity statements, um, in organizations, in departments that universities have, and even in the courses that are taught, that DEI, and then sometimes combined with that the concept of CRT has become a massive topic of conversation. Because of that, and because of some of the vitriol that is attached to it, DEI has been targeted through state legislation. Um, at this point, about 13 states have passed some type of banning of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion in in their higher education institutions, with more to come. There are about 20-ish that are currently in session that are debating passing anti-DEI initiatives. And again, this can target either coursework or diversity statements or how professors and faculty are hired. It's a wide-ranging thing. Sometimes it includes one, sometimes it includes all. Uh, but the fact of the matter is that it's become more common than not. About 2-ish years ago, when I was an undergrad, it was a little bit strange for it to be occurring. Now it's more commonplace than anything, and the majority of states are considering or have passed these kinds of laws. And the states are not, like I mentioned, the states are not the only place where this is a focal point. The Trump administration, especially during his campaign, made it a massive talking point, and we've seen that he's kept up that promise. About, I believe it was 2-ish weeks ago, the Department of Education released a news release that named 50 universities as being under investigation for partnering with a PhD program that made DEI part of its mission. And so it's not just now a statewide initiative, it's now also a federal initiative. So the main issue is, how do you find out when these changes have happened at your institution? Um, these student newsrooms are extremely important to report on these things because even if there is a local paper in a college town, these student newsrooms are connected with the staff, with the students, with the faculty, with the administration, and can better find out and better release this kind of information about what's being cut, what's staying, what's being changed. And so there are a couple things to note when it comes to this kind of information. Sometimes, not always, never, don't take this as a blanket statement, but sometimes university administrations will give this information willingly, either through news releases or records requests, because either they are um, they are generally proud of some of the work that they've done through these initiatives, and so if it's going away, they would want to either the students to know because they believe it's an important resource, or they want that information out there because they don't like that that kind of resource has been cut. Um, and despite wanting to help, this is now going into the records request of things. University administrations may not have a list of names organized. Generally, the way that this works is that the general councils for these universities will kind of go like investigate every single thing that might be affected by these state laws, and at that point either email administration or whoever may be in charge of deciding these things and make these kinds of decisions. And so a list of what's been removed might not exist. It might not be as easy as, can you give me a list of everything that's changed? They might not have a list. And on top of that, asking for information from general counsels who are involved again in this process of law compliance may not be able to give out this information due to attorney-client privilege. General counsel may, I mean, when it comes to filing records requests, um, attorney-client privilege may be referenced as a reason why this can't be released, and that is one of the exemptions under most FOIA statutes. The other issue and the other reason why this is, again, a major talking point is that this information will likely change quickly under the Trump administration. As I've noted, the Department of Education has gone on top of DEI really quickly, and so I don't anticipate the current status, the current environment of this issue to be the same by like the end of this calendar year. It's going to be vastly different. So one of the things that I wanted to do is kind of show student newsrooms very simple steps uh, of how to do this. Um, the student newsrooms that have joined me today, the North Texas Daily and the Lantern, will kind of show you what they've done on top of like these very simple things that I'm doing because they have done a really good job, from my perspective, of investigating and revealing this kind of information. But this basic step, I think, is important for a lot of you students, a lot of you advisors to kind of know because it's it's a very simple thing. I personally don't think I've done anything supremely complicated, but it's revealing and it's very important information that just through like one or two emails you can get. Again, it's some states may require records requests to come from in-states. These are local statutes. For example, if you are a student in Alabama, you have to probably be in Alabama to kind of file this records request. But in general, it should be open for everybody. So what did we do? We filed records requests at 11 universities in 3 states, Texas, Iowa, and Florida, that have passed from what I've seen in my research as uh, probably the most stringent and most all-encompassing anti-DEI laws um, applicable to universities. Again, DEI is also a target in K through 12 schools. That's not the focus today. It's specifically with universities. And one of the challenges is, again, to kind of get this information, I wanted to, again, have this very simple like first step so that you guys can kind of see what is a very simple step that you can do that you might not have done yet to kind of just get the first step of this information. Um, so I filed a records request to all these 11 universities. It's the same prompt. It's about to be right here on the screen. Um, just to kind of get a broad scope of everything that has changed. Um, and these are the results. These are the 11 universities that I filed with. Again, I didn't do any massive follow-ups. So with Florida State University and the University of South Florida, they told me that no such document existed. And so I didn't file any appeal or anything like that. That might be something that you decide to do if you get such a response. Texas Southern University and HBCU in Texas did not comply after several follow-ups. They just didn't respond. But I still got 8 responses. And before we jump into what McKinnon and Nora and Reilly will talk about what they do, I just kind of wanted to show you again this very simple first step, what information I got. Uh, with Florida International University, they gave me a document that was very interesting because they kind of showed me the process in which they decided whether something was like against like that violated the law that passed in Florida, um, and what wasn't. And so they kind of had an explanation, a breakdown. They had like several boxes, and there were a couple things that were cut here and there, um, but they it was really interesting to kind of see their process. It wasn't something I asked for, but they gave it to me anyway. There were some things that were terminated, as you can see on the screen. An example would be diversity mentor professorship, which was an initiative to recruit scientists with a history of commitment and the mentorship of women students and students from underrepresented minority populations. But again, this process was an interesting one to see. University of Houston was, again, I'm going to use the word interesting very, very repetitively, and I apologize, but they didn't really go into the details about what happened with departments, but when it came to specifically the Division of Student Affairs, which is what they, again, as you can see on the screen, they went very deep into the Division of Student Affairs. if I were to file a follow-up records request, I would ask for, like, let's say, thank you, but can you also give me information about what happened at college departments, with trainings, staff trainings, this and that. But this information, when it came to the Division of Student Affairs, was very thorough, and they explained it was very, very like it was the most detail-oriented records response that I've seen. Iowa State University, and as you will see later on, two other universities in Iowa responded to me back in the same email because the Iowa Board Student of Regents did an investigation alongside these three universities and came up with what was violation of the state law and what wasn't. And it was interesting again that it was that I got the response from the Board of Regents, and it was all in one email. And it was very difficult to break down. This is an example of a records request that I think was dozens and dozens of pages, but I was able to find out specifically what was eliminated, what was kept. And then again, they also broke down the process in which how they decided these things. University of Central Florida was it was similar to the first Florida university that I spoke about, where they kind of broke down what is being maintained, what is being cut. Um, Texas A&M University was very broad with what was removed, and this is an example of where I think that they weren't extremely forthcoming. Uh, there are recent reports coming out from Texas A&M student newspaper, the Battalion, and local news outlets that drag races will be banned at Texas A&M University. Um, and this was something that was not mentioned in the email. So again, I think it's these are examples of where you can follow up FOIA requests to kind of figure out what is going on. But they were quite broad, and it is still all encompassing of what is being removed. University of Texas at Austin was very broad as well, um, giving me stuff that I didn't even ask for, which included the full list of faculty staff, as you can see down there, that were eliminated because of the state law. I thought that was quite interesting. Again, you can see at the beginning of the at some point in the presentation where wrote down how I wrote my records request, uh, that I didn't ask for this, but they gave it to me anyway, and I thought it was really interesting information. As I mentioned, University of Northern Iowa was part of that email from the Iowa Board of Regents, as was the University of Iowa. Again, those three schools from Iowa, what was eliminated was very limited. Um, it was a very small number of offices and departments that were removed to the point where I might follow a follow-up just to figure out if this is the case. But it was it was they did give me what they sent me. And again, I didn't do any follow-up emails. I'm not doing any reporting. I don't This wasn't the purpose of that. But for a lot of student newsrooms in these states where this is occurring, this isn't being reported. Um, and it's likely not going to be reported by local news outlets because this is a lot. But as student newsrooms who are directly connected the with the higher education institution where this is occurring, you can find out these things. And it's very important, even if it's something like a scholarship uh, that was given to minority students that is no longer existing because of a local DEI statute. Um, that is important. That is reportable. There are students behind it that are affected. There are alumni that used to have that scholarship that no longer that may have something to say about this thing that helped them with their career that no longer exists. And so again, it was a very simple thing, and I think that it's very important to show that this can be done by anybody. And to kind of show that, we're going to go now to the student newsrooms, the North Texas Daily and the Lantern, as they talk about their experiences. First off, from the North Texas Daily is McKinnon Rice.
Hi, everyone. As Ismael said, my name is McKinnon Rice, and I be editor at the North Texas Daily. I've been a student journalist for 9 semesters now, and as you mentioned, I was the editor-in-chief of our student newspaper last semester. I'm going to be talking to you a little bit today about the work that I've done, particularly in the last year or so, covering the anti-DE measures that happened in Texas specifically. To give you a little bit of reference about the school I go to, it's in Denton, Texas, which is a city just north of Dallas. We have over 46,000 students enrolled. It's a public school. So you can go on the next slide, Ismael, whenever you're ready. Okay, so first I'm going to talk a little bit about the work that I've done using public records. One of the things that I've done at the end of last semester and then at the beginning of this semester is I requested from the university a list of everything that was either eliminated or modified due to Senate Bill 17, which is Texas's version of the anti-DEI law. Basically what Senate Bill 17 or SB 17 does is it prevents universities from undertaking DEI, from having a DEI office, from requiring DEI trainings or statements. But SB 17 is not supposed to impact academic teaching, research, or student organizations. So that's what I was looking into with these lists. And you can go on the next one, Ismael. So this is a little section of our website to see what the stories look like. I started out by doing a little bit of an introduction to the lists to explain how I got my information, which I'll be telling you guys about in a minute, and then explained a little bit about what that law is for people that weren't familiar. But here's like the header that shows what was eliminated, and then I would go through and it's broken down by what like subsection of the university it's under, whether that's a division or a college, the name of whatever was cut, and then if I could find information about it to tell people what it was, I went ahead and put that under it too. And I was able to find stuff for a lot of things, but not everything. And I'm going to go into next how exactly I found some of that information. So this is actually the list that I got back. It was a lot longer than this, but this is a subsection of it so you can see. I got back where exactly it came from, what the name of the thing was, and then whether it was eliminated or modified. But the university didn't give me any other information besides that. I followed up myself to ask them when I was curious about certain things, and sometimes they've gotten back to me, and sometimes I follow up 3 times, and it's been 5 weeks, and then they still haven't. So one of the things that you can do is be persistent if those lists that you get back when you request things from your school don't have information on them, but that is one of the roadblocks that you might face. But the lists are pretty long. There was 90 something things on both of the first 2 that I've requested, and this is just a section of them. In order to find out exactly what some of those things were that I wasn't familiar with, I used something called the Internet Archive's Wayback Machine. This is a website that archives old URLs. One of the things that happened after this law was passed was universities started taking down their web pages for some of these programs that they didn't have anymore. And so in order to figure out what some of these things were, and I might Google them and they show up on the internet, but I click on it, it says 404 error. So I would take that URL and I would put it in this website called the Wayback Machine. And you can see from the image on the left that it shows up with like a calendar and then there's like a timeline. And anywhere where there's those bars is somewhere where that website has captured some sort of like picture basically of that link. So on the right, you can see this is one of the links I used in one of my stories. That's from January 31st. And it tells you what the Counseling Diverse Students program was, that if you tried to go on the website would not be there anymore. This is actually a pretty good representation of what the website looked like. Sometimes you'll put a link into the Internet Archive and it won't look as good as this, but a lot of times at least text is there, if not any sort of pictures or graphics. So it's pretty helpful in order to find out what things are. And that allowed me to know what the Counseling Diverse Students program was that I wouldn't have otherwise. Another thing the Wayback Machine does is it allows you to compare screenshots essentially from the websites that you're looking at. So here is one from a diversity statement from the UNT Well Clinic, which is something that we have on campus. The diversity statement is one of the things that was on one of my lists as cut. But if you put or as modified rather, but if you put the link into the Wayback Machine, you can see that basically the statement stayed the same. They just changed the title of it. So that's not something that you would probably know unless you ran it through this website, because most people don't have that good of a memory as to every single thing that's on our school's websites. So that's a tool that you have through that website that can help you determine what's been changed on web pages and things like that. And then some other stories that I've done. I worked on a story about the university dissolving faculty senate committees that, for example, we had a committee on the status of women faculty that was no longer able to continue. We found out about that through an official email to professors that was then forwarded to us by someone. So that's a really good way to find stories. Is you might get emails as a student that something's changing. You might have your professors or staff members, they get emails and then they forward them to you. And those are good ways to find stories about this. And then also you can go to public meetings that happen at your university. At our school, we have faculty and staff senates, we have a board of regents, and we have a student government association that holds meetings. And you can go to all of those meetings and listen to what they're saying and see what they're talking about. I know particularly for us, the faculty senate meetings are always a super good source of information, because a lot of times the president or the provost or the chancellor will come and talk to the faculty. And in my school, it's not closed to the public, but it's not something that's inherently advertised to students. But as a student journalist, it can be a really great way to figure out what's going on your campus. And something that was said at one of those meetings about things being modified and eliminated was actually what sparked me to go ahead and file those requests and get those lists. So those can be great resources for you. And then also using social media, getting tips from people in your university community. I have a story here about unofficial student organizations being required to register in order to meet on campus. There were student organizations here that were operating sort of in an unofficial capacity because it worked for them, and they were told they had to register. And I found out about that story specifically because I was looking on social media and I found a post from a club that had mentioned they were having issues with the university, and they decided to go meet at a coffee shop next to campus instead of in their art building where they used to meet. I didn't say why, but I reached out to them, and by getting to know them a little bit and asking them questions and earning their trust, I ended up getting a story out of it. So you can find things like that from things like social media and tips. So a few lessons here. One, it's good to be tuned in to what's going on, whether you're going to meetings, paying attention to what people are saying around you, or just keeping in touch with what's going on your campus through social media. And then also your relationship with people on campus as a student journalist is extremely important. If you have the trust of students and faculty, they're going to send you emails and forward you things and tell you about things that you wouldn't know otherwise. They're going to be more likely to talk to you for stories that are a little bit more sensitive if they have your trust. One of the things that is a barrier for us when covering this is that there's a lot of hesitancy for people to talk about this because the consequences for violating Senate Bill 17 are really high, especially for employees of the university. So that's when, conducting yourself professionally and making sure that your work is always at the highest quality is super important, because that is your reputation. That's a lot of times how you'll end up earning trust to get even more stories.
All right, thank
That's
you.
all I have this month.
Thank you so much, McKinnon. So next up we have again Nora Igelnik and Reilly Ackermann from the Lantern at Ohio State University. Their situation is a little bit interesting because they are not one of the 13 states that have officially passed a law. They are one of the states where the law is currently in session. Ohio Bill 6 in the last couple of weeks, I believe, has passed both the state Senate and the House. And so they are currently in this transitionary period of where, well, these changes are happening. So again, thank you again, Nora and Reilly.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, yep, my name is Nora, and I am the campus editor for the Lantern.
My name is Reilly. I'm a fourth year in journalism and Spanish, and I'm the assistant campus editor with the Lantern.
Yeah, I'm also in journalism. But basically, all the news about DEI has kind of been happening for us at lightning speed recently, but it started a little bit slower. We first received a tip from a professor within journalism that a position, the senior vice provost for inclusive excellence, was eliminated. And this was kind of happening when talks of DEI being removed and like the Trump administration coming in was happening a lot. So we kind of had to do some investigation to figure out if it was true or not. And we were able to find out that Wendy Smoot, who was that former provost, was moved back to her faculty position once this other position was removed. We did file 2 public records requests to receive information about it, but they didn't really receive much, and Wendy was not responding to comments. But we were able to hear from the assistant vice provost from Inclusive Excellence, who, for some reason, that position wasn't eliminated while the head position was. And then we got an email that was forwarded to us from other people that the provost of the university sent, kind of addressing faculty about Smoot's position being eliminated. So that's kind of how we pieced our first story of this whole DEI saga together. And that's on the next slide. Yep. So that's where we finally got this out, that this leadership position was eliminated. So then from there, we start reporting about Senate Bill 1.
Yeah. So around this time, Senate Bill 1 was gaining traction among students. Essentially what it does, very similar to what's already happened in Texas, is it bans diversity, equity, and inclusion programming, along with faculty striking in all of Ohio public higher education, as well as censoring what teachers and professors can teach about, like that are controversial subjects. So there have been a lot of protests surrounding this bill. A lot of faculty and students had voiced their concern. So it's very much interwoven with the university's response to DEI, especially because the Ohio Senate had attempted to pass a bill, Senate Bill 83, a few years ago. That was essentially the same, and the university publicly spoke against it. So it was very important to us that we make sure we're following this bill, because it is moving through the Senate at a very rapid rate.
Yep. So then we start seeing more like federal government activities trickle down, which has kind of been what's impacting OSU a lot recently. So the Dear Colleague letter that I'm sure lots of you have heard about was released by the U.S. Department of Education and posted on the X account of the Department of Government Efficiency, basically saying that if public universities didn't eliminate their DEI initiatives and anything related to DEI by the end of February, that they would be at risk of losing federal funding. So after this is where we kind of start seeing the university react much more strongly, because now they're kind of, not only is there SB1 and this state Senate bill that's threatening funding, but now, there's risk of federal funding being lost if they keep DEI initiatives.
Yeah, so this created a lot of conversation around what the university's response to this would be. A lot of professors that we have built relationships to and talked to, were very much worried about them preemptively responding to Senate Bill 1. And then with the added addition of the Dear Colleague letter, lots of people were very concerned about the university's DEI initiatives. And the day before the 2-week period of the Dear Colleague letter, we had received embargoed information from our university spokesperson that the university was going to follow through in discontinuing 2 of their biggest DEI programs. As you can see in the headline, the Office of Diversity and Inclusion and the Center for Belonging and Social Change, which would then remove 16 professional staff positions as well. So like McKinnon said about university faculty senate meetings, this is where that was announced. And so it's very important to be able to send either reporters or yourselves to these meetings, because there are very timely, important information that is being revealed at those. But if you go to the next slide, you can kind of see our process. So the day of the meeting, we were planning to send a reporter, and we had received a call from Ben Johnson, who is our main university spokesperson, who told us that there would be big DEI news at this meeting, and that one of our executive positions, Nora and I, or our managing editor and editor-in-chief, should be at the meeting. So we called him back and asked him for more information, and he gave us this embargoed press release that detailed all of the changes the university was planning to make about 3 hours before the meeting. So something that's been very helpful to us in this process is building strong relationships with the university spokespeople, because they are, if you have a good working relationship, they are more willing to share this kind of information with us. As you can see in the email, the only other person included was the higher education reporter from the Columbus Dispatch, our local metro paper. So this was very big for us, to be included with them in this news. But essentially before the meeting, we had 2 hours to write up a story on all this information. And Nora and I attended the meeting ourselves, and I sat next to Ben Johnson the whole time, and he told us exactly when the embargo was lifted, which is how we were able to get the news up so fast.
Yeah, and during all this, we were also like actively posting on social media and everything of the meeting so that we could get information out to the public even faster. And having that relationship with the spokespeople is kind of a big reason how we can be a competitive newspaper within the city. Like, because we're being included on emails that like the Columbus Dispatch is getting and things like that. Because we've proven that like we can get the news out fast and that we are a reliable source. And that's happened a lot. That's helped us a lot with all of this DEI coverage. So yeah, sorry, you could go to the next slide now. But this is where our coverage really speeds up, because now it's not just rumors anymore. It's nothing like that. Like, this is real. These departments that have been around for 50 plus years or so are gone. And people are protesting. So the next day after President Carter announced the DEI sunsetting, there was a protest in the morning. So we went ahead and covered that. We brought photographers. I took that photo there on the top right. We went to the Office of Diversity and Inclusion office, and basically all the students who have ever been affected by their work or like have been under their scholarships or anything were there. And then we had this huge protest and on the Oval, which is like our big on-campus green space, where almost 1,000 people came, and it was organized by faculty protesting Senate Bill 1 and criticizing Ted Carter for kind of what they call like preemptive obedience to this legislation. And yep, from there, we kind of go into more long form reporting as well. We had this one story from sunrise to sunset, the history of Ohio State's Office of Diversity and Inclusion, because we thought it was kind of important for people who were unfamiliar with the office and like hadn't really been affected by it to see its history and how it has been around for students for so long. And then Reilly and our arts and life editor, Sam, they wrote a story having student organizations who are familiar with like the DEI space react to those types of programming cuts. So we've tried our best to do kind of a holistic reporting. So not only do we have breaking news, but we're trying to go deeper with the limited resources we have as a student paper with not that many people, to paint the largest picture that we can.
Mm-hmm. And it's especially important for us too, because we are students, and we work so closely with students and faculty who are very affected by this, to make sure that we are providing them with all the information they need about these topics, especially with Senate Bill 1. It hasn't passed yet, and it can be very confusing to understand the Ohio legislature. So making sure that we give them all the information that they need is very critical to how we delegate our reporting as well.
Yeah, sorry, I'll go. But yeah, so we kind of continue to have protests now that are geared less towards DI in the university, but more about Senate Bill 1 because it's been active in the House. Actually, it was just passed last week through the House, so now it has to go back to the Senate before it goes to Governor Mike DeWine's desk to see if it will be signed into law. And when that happens, I'm not sure where coverage will be, but it's going to be probably crazy because this is seriously going to affect all aspects of the university in ways we haven't seen in our career here at the Lantern. But I think everything that's happened up to this point has kind of trained us for what's to come. And just seeing like how federal and state legislation, all of this can affect Ohio State and our school, our paper, has really been eye-opening to how all of these like governmental entities are connected in the real world and how we'll be able to report on them later on in our careers.
Mm-hmm. And similar to what McKinnon said as well, a lot of this coverage was done especially because of our relationship with faculty and students. Even though Senate Bill 1 hasn't been passed yet, a lot of professors, especially under the Trump administration, are worried about speaking out on these controversial topics because of their positions within the university. So by like McKinnon said, like earning their trust and fostering a relationship, we're able to share their perspectives with a broader audience without fear.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Nora and Reilly. Thank you again to everybody who attended this panel, this presentation. And if there are any questions, all four of us are willing to answer.
Yeah, and hi everyone. I'm Josh from SPLC. I'm going to help kind of navigate the Q&A. So please feel free to drop your questions in the chat for any of the folks that you've heard from today. And Ismael, if you want to take away the slides, that way we can see everyone more easily, maybe. I'll read. There were a couple questions from folks as they were registering, so I'll start with those. And I think everyone kind of talked a little bit about earning trust and building those relationships, which is where you all were just kind of ending your discussion. So I was hoping maybe you could talk a little bit more about that if you had specific suggestions about earning trust with folks who are fearful about speaking out, on obviously a very sensitive topic. And then also maybe on the flip side, maybe there are students on campus who are anti-DEI that you want to talk to as well. So how do you approach building relationships with people on all sides of this conversation?
Yeah, we can jump in. I think in terms of building relationships with people who are like more fearful about speaking out about it, I think it's really important to make sure when someone comes to you and they want to speak off the record and they, don't pressure them to be on the record or like just pull a quote and extract something from them when they don't want to. If someone's coming to you and they're trying to provide you with some sort of information, even if you can't really use that yet, it may lead you somewhere, and it also may make them more comfortable to talk to you when maybe one day they do want to go on the record and they do want to say something that's going to go online or in print. So I think it's important to just be patient, honestly. And then when talking to people who are anti-DEI, as a journalist, you have to be as neutral as possible and welcoming to any source who you want to talk to or wants to talk to you. And it's really important to get all perspectives. I mean, that's our job, right? I mean, this legislation is happening. There are people who want it. There are people who support it. So I think it's kind of just that same thing as just treating everyone that comes to you equally with respect and showing that you want to hear their side of the story. I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I agree. In terms of faculty speaking to us as well, who may be worried, one of the biggest things that like Nora was saying too is just like being able to show them basic empathy. Even if we do have to stay neutral in this process, like not just treating it like it's a transactional relationship is super important to being able to build trust with them.
And then a little bit more about building trust in general as a student journalist. What they both said was great. And to talk a little bit more broadly, one of the things that I have run into as a student journalist, and that some of you guys probably have too, is it is difficult sometimes to get people to trust you because you're a student, because there might be a perception that you don't always know what you're doing. And even though you know what you're doing, other people don't. And when you're talking to people whose jobs might be on the line or they think they are, um, that's a lot to ask of someone. Like, hey, I'm 20 years old. I've been in college, for a few years. Tell me things that could get you in trouble. Like, that's a hard thing to ask someone. So, some things that you can do to combat the perception is be extremely professional and respectful when you're talking to people. Think about how you're sending emails and making phone calls. Make sure you're addressing people, Dr. So and so, Professor so and so. Make sure the grammar in your emails is correct. And then when you talk to someone on the phone, be really polite. When you talk to someone in person too, obviously. If you're going to go to a public meeting, dress up a little. I mean, a lot of us, we don't necessarily dress up for class, but if you're going to go for a meeting and you're representing your paper and yourself, think about how you're presenting yourself a little bit. And those are some things that you can do to combat that perception that in some ways is just out of your control.
Yeah, fantastic advice. And that's a great point that it's being a student journalist in this situation is both helpful in building those sources, but also there are those people who see that as another reason not to trust you. So I appreciate that, McKinnon. Ismael, someone was asking about access to the records that you came up with in your public records projects. So I assume that we're going to try to post those somewhere at some point. Is that correct?
Yeah, everything that I found will hopefully in the next 2 weeks, I think that's the idea, have on the SPLC website.
Excellent. So while we weren't looking to report on these things directly, you certainly can use that to do reporting on your own. Someone was asking about anonymous sources. So that's a great question. Have any of you all used anonymous sources in the stories that you're working on, and kind of how do you approach that?
So at the Lantern, our policy is we try to not use anonymous sourcing. Kind of like what McKinnon was saying, we already people do not, have the same trust they have for student journalists that they have for regular newspapers. So we don't want to make people even more skeptical of our coverage, and we'd rather just to be as transparent as we can, have people speak on the record than anonymous. So the only situations we've ever used anonymous sourcing are is like if someone's like in physical danger, or if it's like a crime or like anything like that. But for DEI and things like that, we've just, if someone doesn't want to speak on the record, we will just not include them in the story, just so we can avoid anonymous sourcing.
Yeah, I think it's also been easier for us in a sense in this moment too, because this legislation has not passed. So university staff and faculty have a lot more freedom to continue to speak out on it. If it was passed, that wouldn't be the case. So I think it's a lot easier for us to get voices because they want that to be projected to a larger audience.
At the Daily, we have a very similar policy. We try not to use anonymous sources at all costs. We'll always take the information, and anything that people can tell us is helpful to us. But we'd rather try to find another way than publish something anonymously because of the credibility issue. One thing I would add is sometimes someone might be hesitant, and then by the time they get to know you and they tell you what's going on, then you can sort of I don't want to say convince because that sounds pushy. And like Nora and Reilly mentioned, you don't want to be pushy. You don't want to pressure people. But sometimes that can naturally be the progression of things, is that someone's really hesitant to go on the record about something. And then you explain to them a little bit about, how your paper operates, what kind of story you would want to write, what your policies are as far as like sources and things like that. And then become comfortable enough to want to go on the record. So that's also something to consider.
And hopefully folks already are aware of this or have contemplated before, but once you establish that trust, once you establish that rapport and promise to keep someone as a confidential source, doing everything that you can to continue with tamping that identity down and keeping that to yourselves, having it just be your reporter having that identity of that confidential source, maybe sharing with one other editor on staff, but not giving that identity to our advisor. That's just something that can be used against our advisor in the event that their employment is premised or conditioned on giving that source, revealing that source for us. So that also might mean doing a little old school interviewing and not necessarily using Otter to transcribe. And so those transcriptions are automatically on our university cloud, or with Otter generally, you don't want them getting subpoenaed for that identity. But one additional point here, please approach our free legal hotline in the event that you all get an FOI. If you start doing these stories and you say that someone is a confidential source, and now all of a sudden, like a parent group from out of state even might be doing an open records request as to your newsroom, please contact us immediately. It's a really weird analysis that's involved there, and you don't have to go through it alone. Again, please reach.
Yeah, and these are all things that we have seen. So it's hopefully theoretical in your context, but it's not that theoretical after all. Someone was asking for Nora, but I think it probably applies to McKinnon too, is how do you manage coverage of such a big topic with a small staff?
Great question. It's something that we have to deal with every day because the people who, have the experience to cover this type of stuff are me and Reilly and our editor-in-chief and our managing editor. So it's really been like a 4-person team. We have 6 reporters on our desk, but they all have different beats and we're all students. So we're not always available to cover everything, but kind of what I've learned, and I don't know, Reilly probably has a similar experience. Like, you just have to start trusting people more. If you think a reporter isn't necessarily ready for like some sort of news event and you're nervous because you can't be there, you just have to trust that they're going to do a good job and that you're giving them the opportunity to learn and to improve. And I think that's what's important when you're working on a small team, is you have to utilize every resource you have. It's not always going to be perfect, and that's okay because we're a lab paper, we're students. It's not going to always be perfect. But that's how we've been able to like learn and grow as a desk, as the campus desk, because everybody's slowly getting more experience with this DEI stuff. And it's really helped us make our reporting stronger when we have such a small team.
Yeah, I agree.
I think that is definitely also something that applies to me. Our staff is maybe 30 to 50 people, depending on the semester, but not all of them are in news, and a lot of them are really, really new. So what you guys are talking about, how only having a few like people that have like the experience to do that, is also a scenario that we have faced. And for me, covering this beat, I want to be able to do everything, but I just can't because I'm in class, or like there's something we have Thursday that I can't go to because I'm out of town. And so what y'all were talking about leaning on people and being able to trust other people is super important for us too, because at the end of the day, I can't do everything and I have to lean on my people. And also I need to, because I need to get other perspectives and the advice of my editors and colleagues.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see. We have a question. Maybe this is for Jonathan on the legal side. How do you find information from the school about employees who have been fired or put on leave when the school won't give you that information, citing the employee's privacy?
So I don't want to assume that everyone here is part of a public institution. Private institutions, we're going to not have quite as much access to those pieces of information. But there are reach rounds that we can sometimes take advantage of. Please reach out to our free legal hotline where that's concerned. When it's a public institution, we're typically able to do an open records request. I'm assuming that the person who asked the question engaged in some of that process. And it varies state by state as to what we're entitled to related to employee discipline. Very often states will have a very heightened response to that expectation of privacy of the employer, and they can actually get into trouble. The institution get into trouble for just willy-nilly, giving people some of those employment termination documents or investigation reports. However, it depends. Like I said, from state to state. I can give Louisiana as an example, where that state legislature said there is no expectation of privacy if you're caught up in the system of public employee discipline. So in Louisiana, I don't think we would have any trouble getting that information about firing or put on leave. But a neighboring state right next door might have vastly different laws. So please feel free to reach out to our hotline. We can help you through those processes of molding an open records request in a way that will be able to navigate some of those state differences.
Ismael, I don't think that you got to that level of detail in your work, but was there anything that you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, some of the work that I think McKinnon reference actually is helpful in this regard. Generally, faculty, like the list of faculty that are employed at a certain college or department are listed on the university website, and if they get fired or get put on leave, sometimes that just gets removed, right? So I'm working under the assumption that you don't know everything, and like you just got a tip that this professor got removed. Using stuff like the Wayback Machine is sometimes a very useful tool to kind of get this information of, well, was this person ever listed? If they were, okay, now they're gone. And then at that point, you now know that this professor was fired. One of the things that I wanted to emphasize with that kind of thing is, especially now that DEI is going to lead to a lot of changes, this is definitely a big undertaking, but I would recommend journalists to start to upload that information onto the Wayback Machine or through screenshots or things like that to kind of save that information, because as things change, it's not always reliable that it's going to stay that you're going to have some kind of record of something changing online. So using the Wayback Machine, using screenshots, using other resources that exist. I believe Muckrock also has an existing resource to kind of track changes on websites. Can be a very, again, surface level, but an ability to see stuff that has changed when it comes to staffing lists online.
Perfect. Well, with that, we are at time. I did want to just mention one other reason to contact our hotline, and I think that Nora and Reilly and McKinnon have laid out so perfectly why it's really important for student journalists to be covering these issues on their campuses. But there are those student news organizations who might be concerned that these laws or mandates apply directly to them. If, for example, their websites are part of the university system, there might be questions about, if you were to report on this, does that put you on the hook for violating some of these things? So definitely, if that is a question that you have, please reach out to the hotline, talk to Jonathan, talk to Mike. We definitely want to help you with that. And of course, any of your other questions that come up in the course of your reporting. Ismael, anything else that you want to leave us with?
Just that, again, some of this information is bound to change as DEI becomes a bigger focus, as the federal government becomes more involved in this process. Some of this information may become less and less accessible or more difficult to access. And so as that time changes, organizations like SPLC and others that exist are going to continue to try to keep this information as updated as possible, as we also try to scurry and get as much information as we can to keep all of you guys informed. And again, thank you guys for attending this presentation.
Yeah, and thank you, Nora, Reilly, and McKinnon for joining us and sharing your excellent reporting. We'll post the recording of this conversation online and include some links to the reporting that you've shared so that folks can check that out. And again, yeah, thank you for everyone who joined us today.